Hello and welcome back to another episode of CantoSense. We love having you join us as we embrace Chinese culture for Christian living. Today we're here to talk about worship music, and specifically worship music that is in the English language. For English-speaking cultural Chinese believers, let me say that again, English-speaking cultural Chinese believers, do the worship songs that we sing in English reflect the cultural values that we hold?
From my own personal experience, I have found that many cultural Chinese who attend English language services sing worship and praise songs that are sourced from churches in the West, mostly from North America or places like Australia. And these songs are written by Western songwriters who come from a much more individualistic and guilt-innocent cultural orientation. Since the cultural Chinese worldview is more communal and oriented towards the honor, shame culture, a lot of the values that we hold may not be reflected in these songs that we sing. And as a result of that, these songs may not resonate as deeply to the Chinese soul when we sing them.
We do have a friend who's going to join us who is gifted and seasoned in this space, and we are just so excited to hear from her. Well, we want to give a very warm CantoSense welcome to Ruth Chen, or you may know her by her Chinese name as Zhang Lo. You may have attended her outreach meetings or heard her music on YouTube or in her CDs. Welcome, Ruth. Thank you for joining us.
I come from a very Westernized family. My grandmother taught us to sing hymns ever since I was born, I think.
You were singing when you were born. That's gifting right there.
I was brought up in an English church. Even singing hymns in Chinese it's very rare for me. Then I went to the States for my university, and I first encountered so-called contemporary Christian music. It was very enlightening because the hymns, I don't feel anything at that age. You have to remember, I was young then and very different. So when I got into the Western Christian music, I thought, wow, so nice, because now I could relate. It talks about my feelings, how I can go to God. The I is very important at that time. And then I came back to Hong Kong and I started recording in Chinese, not Christian music, just popular music.
This was back in the 80s, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so a lot of the songs that they were using in churches were hymns.
Yeah, at that time.
Hymns that came from the Western church.
All the songs are written ages ago, too foreign. So the young people will not be able to relate. So we started something called the Hong Kong Association of Christian Music, using indigenous Hong Kong music. They took what Hong Kong people locally wrote and then put it in the context of Christian music. We did it by categories. Of course, there was the dedication, commitment, praise, and thanksgiving, and prayer, and evangelism, and teaching. But there are other things that we don't sing too much in the Western songs. Filial piety, which is very rare. Life in general, using biblical principles and putting into how we should approach life. Just basic, simple, everyday life.
Very pragmatic. That's very Chinese. Yes.
So it actually revolutionized the Chinese church in Hong Kong. So now these are classics. All the fellowships in the Chinese church in Hong Kong, they just soaked in it. When the worship movement started in the 90s, then there's a whole different thing. Before, when we address God, we say God. But then now we use you to address God. Now that made it very relatable. But I was still in my English service. I realized that I miss some of the community songs that we had. There's too much I. It's more about me than about us. And it's more about me than about God. There is a danger now, and I hope that it will be remedied.
I know you attend an English-speaking church in Hong Kong right now. How do you find the songs that we use in the English language service? Do you see some of these Chinese values being surfaced in these songs, like shame, honor, filial piety, harmony?
Very, very rarely. Not only that, even in the basic outline for worship, we tend to use the ACTS, which is adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. I had a very difficult time finding confession songs. Very, very, very difficult. I wonder why don't they confess? It gravitates towards very positive living, very successful.
Triumphant and victorious.
Well, because confession songs probably wouldn't make you feel very good. But then the question is, are we here just to make ourselves feel good? Right?
Exactly.
You brought up a really good point there about things that we value both culturally and most importantly, biblically, and really redeeming some of these values, some of these themes in the songs that we sing in our worship.
Worship can be corporate worship, and it can be your own worship. We need to really balance it out. There should be songs that speaks to you personally, but then we must balance it with a lot of us and we, because we're coming every Sunday together. Isn't it a we thing?
Absolutely.
Isn't it an us thing?
Absolutely.
So we should come before God as one body. So where is that one body? I really hope that there will be more and more of this balancing.
Is there a difference in the way you experience worship in the different languages? Do you prefer one over the other, or are there certain words or elements or parts of the music?
I do a lot of evangelistic meetings. At first, I didn't even like singing in Cantonese. And then it became so that I became very into the Cantonese lyrics. I think Chinese is very, very expressive. You could use forwards and it could mean a whole sentence. It's very important that people relate to it. The words that you use, in the context.
It's your heart language.
And the music, actually, it's very important in the sense that they understand the music as well. In Hong Kong, the people understand pop music. So we use kind of a pop music guideline to it. But in China, they probably understand more folk songs. So they use a more folkish way of delivering. That's how it is. I think that's how we join everybody.
There's this fascinating story about this missionary, Timothy Richard, who was in China in the late 1800s. And he would visit Buddhist monasteries and temples. And he would hear these chants, and the sound and the melody of the chants was so amazing and fascinating to him. He would put psalms to the melody of these chants. And they became so popular because people could relate even to the sound. Like you say, the melody is important. They're familiar with the melody of chants. And that's contextualization at its finest, isn't it?
Yes.
It is such a broad and rich topic, but we hope that the insights and the wisdom from Ruth will help us all just think more deeply about this, even as we worship both individually and corporately. Thank you for joining us, Ruth.
Thank you.
A couple of years ago, I was at this concert where they were singing old gospel songs from China. And at one point, they were singing psalms, but they were really chanting. And this is what we talked about, how Timothy Richards was contextualizing psalms for use in the church. And I grew up in a Taoist Buddhist household, and I would visit the temple with my mom. But when I heard psalms being chanted, very similar to a Buddhist chant, I literally just broke down and started crying. Not only was it very familiar to me, it really touched something that was very deep in my soul. It really resonated with me in a way that the singing of the Psalms has never, ever before. It reinforces the need for us to think about contextualizing the songs that we sing.
We talk about heart language, and I think most people understand that, right? If you are from mainland China and you speak Mandarin, hearing or singing a worship song in Mandarin will give you a richer experience. I think most people can wrap their head around that. But what we've discussed today is really even one step further than heart language, but it's heart culture. even if it is in the English language, but if the style, if the themes, if the values reflect your heart culture, being the Chinese culture, not the
Yeah.
Western culture, that also adds to an extra level of richness within that worship experience. We hope you'll join us again for another episode of CantoSense.
For as high as the skies above the earth, so great is your love for us, and as far